Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our next episode of the virtual Heart of the Business Conference. I'm Tom Jacobs, and along with my co-producers, Rita Hernandez-Figge, Jake Bartelt, and the rest of our team at MedHQ, we thank you for watching our Heart of the Business Conference. We're joined also by John Page, our host and discussion moderator, as well as today's special guest, Fran Scott. Fran is the Central Region Health and Performance Practice Leader for Hub International. The purpose of the Heart of the Business Conference is to gather people together who are interested in topics around wellness and well-being. That is, well-being for individuals as well as for the companies and organizations for which we all work. As part of our Heart of the Business Conference series, we are collecting donations on behalf of the Metro Chicago Heart Walk. Thank you for your donations, and thank you for watching this episode of the virtual Heart of the Business Conference. All proceeds collected from you, and we mean all proceeds, will be delivered directly to Metro Chicago Heart Walk. This is an event created by the American Heart Association to attract community involvement and financial support for the AHA. In fact, MedHQ is also donating to the Heart Walk through 100% matching contributions, dollar for dollar. We are also fortunate to have many wonderful sponsors supporting our efforts and those of the Metro Chicago Heart Walk. Today, I'd like to especially thank Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois for their support. In today's episode, our host, John Page, will dialogue with Fran Scott. Again, Fran is the Central Region Health and Performance Practice Manager for Hub International. Sorry, that's a mouthful, but she does great work. And there we'll be talking about well-being. It's an area of expertise that Fran has, and she has a great deal of passion about it. We've heard her speak before, and I know she's going to do a great job with John here today. So with all that said, John and Fran, please take it away.
Hi, I'm John Page, here again with Heart of the Business from MedHQ. And today my guest is Fran Scott. She's a practice leader for health and performance at Hub International here in Chicago. Fran, welcome to Heart of the Business.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
So you have been working in population health and wellness for a long time. Tell us about yourself and how'd you get into this?
Yes, I sure have. Getting a little long in the tooth, but I have been in the health and well-being space for about 25 years, and I graduated back in 1992 with a master's degree in health and exercise science. And so I began my career on the corporate fitness side of the health and well-being space. So a lot of corporations have on-site fitness centers, and I was on that side of the space for about 12 years. Then I moved over to the health and wellness side. So organizations that had well-being strategies and well-being initiatives, I started to manage those for Fortune 500 companies in the Chicago area. And today I consult in that space. So organizations that are embarking on or in some facet of their health and well-being, whether they're just starting or they're very seasoned with their program in population health management and well-being strategies, I consult with them on that.
So a lot of people believe that, you're kind of cooked at the time that you're born. Your genes define how long you will live. And there's probably something to that, but I'm guessing as a wellness expert, you're probably not believing that it's all cooked from the very beginning, right?
Yeah, definitely not. So what the research shows, if you look at the determinants of health, genetics really only represents somewhere between 10 and 20% of the outcomes of your health, including your longevity. The other factors that are involved include things like access to care. It's about 20% of your health determinant. 30% of your health outcome is related to your behaviors, and about 50% are related to your social determinants of health. So your environment, your social environment, and the financial environment that somebody lives in. And so, yeah, I think that that's a really relevant point of this, is that I think many times, there's certain instances, certain diseases, sickle cell, for example, Huntington's disease, that are super driven by genetics. There's no question about that. But I think it's pretty common in the United States, especially, for people to think like, well, I got cancer, or I've developed diabetes, or I've become overweight as I've gotten older. And the truth of that is that's very much largely driven by lifestyle. And the incidence of chronic illness that we have today in the United States spending $3.5 trillion.
$3.5 trillion. Wow.
$3.5 trillion with a T towards healthcare. 75 to 80% of that is determined to be driven by lifestyle factors. So those 4 lifestyle factors, diet, exercise, tobacco use, and alcohol, are the main drivers of that. And so, like I said, genetics only plays a small part in the outcomes of people's health. And there's so much that people can do, very simple things with lifestyle that greatly impacts that outcome for them. And of course, like I said, for the nation. Yeah. So $3.5 trillion. And if you look at the spend of GDP as a percent of GDP across all of the developed nations, it's very interesting to look at the United States relative to the rest of the developed world. And this is one of the places that we're in first place in a bad way, where the rest of the developed world is spending about 10%, somewhere between 8 and 10% of GDP on healthcare, and the United States is about 18%. It's really shocking. And when you think about, in the next decade, it's expected that we're going to be spending in the $4 to $5 trillion, and that's mind-boggling numbers. And again, I think the most important takeaway from that is less that it's X trillion dollars than it is that is very, very much driven largely by preventable lifestyle-related chronic illness.
So what do we need to do? Do I need to join a gym, work out 2 hours a day? Are there simple things that I can do?
Yeah, really simple things. And so I think that tees up nicely into this topic that we want to talk about today with the blue zones. But you don't have to be a member of the gym. You don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to eat a very, very specific diet. What we know based on really decades of research around lifestyles, it boils down to very simple things that people need to be doing with their staying active, eating a healthy diet. And there's great variety within eating, quote unquote, a healthy diet of what people should do on that front. So it's not specific to one particular way of eating, but there are some basic principles around that. Don't smoke, don't use alcohol to a great extent. If you do those 4 things, your outcomes for health are going to trend very, very well. But you can see that in this country, if you think about like the way, let's use physical activity as an example, and where we were 50 years ago in this country as compared to today, we've automated so much of our lives, and we drive everywhere. We sometimes live in suburbs, depending on where you live, where you don't even think about walking somewhere. It's just, you're going to get in the car to go to the grocery store, to do errands, et cetera, et cetera. And 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. We had maybe one car per family. We walked everywhere. I think if you're my age or close to it, we rode our bikes starting at maybe 9 or 10 years old all over. And that was just kind of the way we did things. And dietarily, like I said earlier, there's so much decades of research around the way to, and I think we all know what a healthy diet could and should be. But there's a lot of dollars in the confusion that's created by dietary books and people that come out and say, eat this way specifically, and people go buy that book, and then that only works for a little bit of time, et cetera. And so it's unfortunate because, like I said, there's decades of research behind lifestyle and the simple things that people could be doing and adopting to have good outcomes, healthy life. So good years to life, longer life, and better years in that life. Because where we are today is our longevity is pretty long, 78, 80 years old, but our disease state in those last 10 to 15 years is getting longer. So people are living longer a little bit, which you think is a good thing, but many, many more of those years are now diseased than were ever the case before. So those years of healthy life are shrinking, and the dollars associated, not to mention what is that like to live with chronic illness, in your 60s and 70s, it can be painful. There's a lot of deleterious things that happen, and it's really unfortunate.
So what can I do? I'm going to be 63 this year. I want to live till I'm 95. but I want to be able to be active and alive at 95. I have a friend who's 103. He still gets up every day, walks a lot. That's probably half the battle right there. He eats well.
Yeah, that's it. Probably doesn't use tobacco, limits alcohol.
Correct.
Like I said, those are those 4 things. So moving naturally, and we'll talk about that when we move into the blue zones part of the discussion. But
what are the blue zones? Tell me about that. I've never heard that term.
Okay, great. So the blue zones, what I love about it is it's kind of a great answer to a longer answer maybe to your questions around what are the sorts of things that people could be doing today in a real simple way to be able to live a longer, healthier life. And so what the blue zones are specifically is started back in 2003. There were researchers and that started looking at populations where there was great longevity and people living healthier and longer lives. And these researchers published an article in the Journal of Gerontology studying an area in Sardinia. And they identified this population as being very long-lived. They had the most centenarians in the world identified. And then what ended up happening was a researcher, a journalist, I should say, by the name of Dan Buettner, he sort of built on their work and went out with a team of demographers to set out to find other pockets of people around the world who had high life expectancy or populations with high proportions of people living to be 100. And they found 5 of these hotspots around the world, and they called them blue zones. And the blue zones just had to do with those original 2 guys, and they're Gianni Pes and Michael Poulain. When they identified that area in Sardinia, they circled them with blue pen, and then they went out further and further, and that's where the term came from. But in any event, with Dan and his team of demographers went out and they identified these 5 hotspots around the world. They called them blue zones, and that's now a trademark, and it reflects the lifestyle, the environment of these long-lived populations. So there's 5 of these blue zones, the original, and I'll just tell you what they are. So that's the Barbagia region of Sardinia. That was the original. It's a mountainous highlands in inner Sardinia, the world's highest concentration of male centenarians. So that was the original. Then it was Icaria, Greece, an Aegean island with one of the world's lowest rates of middle-aged mortality and the lowest rates of dementia. The Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, it's the world's lowest rates of middle-aged mortality, second highest concentration of male centenarians. And then interestingly, in the United States, the only place that's been identified here is in Loma Linda, California. Can you think about why that might be? Loma Linda, California. Who lives there?
Maybe they are very active folks that have access to great healthcare, great nutrition, surfer dudes, who knows, right?
That's a good guess. Well, it's also where in the United States, the Seventh-day Adventists live. Okay. And they have a very interesting lifestyle that's built around many of the principles of the blue zones, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. So they live 10 years longer than their North American counterparts. And then the last and final identified 5th blue zone is Okinawa, Japan, where the females over 70 are the longest lived population in the world. So those are the 5. And what's super cool, to answer your question about, what are the blue zones? Now, what they did was they went and they looked at these 5 places deeply, and they did deep research on them and to find out, what are they doing there? How are they living? And then they came up with these 9 common denominators of what these folks are actually doing. And I'd love to go into them with you in detail, but I'll just rattle them off here for you to kind of give you wrap your brain around them. So move naturally, purpose, downshift, 80% rule, plant slant, wine at 5, love that one, right tribe, love ones first, and belong. So very simple. In that list, you didn't see anything that said join a gym.
Yeah, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear follow the Atkins diet. I didn't hear. Yeah. I heard moderation. I heard mindfulness.
Yes. Wow. Exactly.
And that's really one of the keys to longevity, and not even just longevity, but in terms of being a healthy 90-year-old.
Yeah. And what I also love about it, John, is like, I want to live like 52 now, and I historically, I've had a very active life and played basketball in college and did a lot of running and triathlon and all those things. But that kind of hurt, like in the end, at this age, I'm sort of reaping the rewards of all that active lifestyle and what it's had orthopedically, and I've got a back thing and et cetera.
Yeah, you had a knee replacement last year. I do understand.
You know what I'm talking about, right? And so while when I was in my younger years, you couldn't have talked me out of that lifestyle and the rigor, and I had such, drive and endless energy. And today I don't want to live that way at all. And I'm totally on the opposite end of the spectrum to a certain degree in terms of sort of a really high intensity, whatever. I still teach spin class and I do enjoy those things, but it's really basic things, as you said, about, movement. And I think I mentioned to you, like, I don't have a car. So when I started living when I started learning about blue zones, maybe a decade ago, and getting sort of my arms around it as my life started to evolve and getting out of that maybe more traditional gym space. And again, I still like those things, but the evolution is like today, I consider myself like a walker, maybe more than anything. Selling my car, it's been 2.5 years about now, and I live in a community outside of Chicago that I can walk everywhere. Everywhere is within roughly 1.5 miles of my house. So my 2 grocery stores, my gym is about 1 mile away, the movie theater, all the parks, the places that we live around. And one of the things that came out of Blue Zones that's pretty cool is that they figured out that most of us, 95% of us, live within 5 miles of our house, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it, right? So if I can engineer my 5 miles around my house to make it very walkable, healthy food adoption, community-based. Another cool thing that's come out of the no car thing for me is, since I am walking out a lot, so when you're experiencing the world at the average walking pace of 2.5 or 3 miles per hour, the pace is slow enough where you can enjoy like the houses and the nature. You're meeting people.
The birds, right?
You can hear the birds, and this is really important for someone like me who lives by themselves, because a big part of healthy outcomes is social connection. And so in being out in my community and walking, I'm walking at a pace where when I see a neighbor or when I see somebody on the street, I'm not whizzing by them on my bike or in my car where it's maybe a wave out the window. I've caught up with people in the last 2.5 years that I've lived by for 20 years that I didn't know their name before, didn't really know anything too deeply about them. And that sense of community that has arisen out of me not having a car, I can't tell you how impactful that's been for my personal well-being. And so when I think about, knowing what I know about blue zones, I know that social connectivity is critically important for people's health and outcomes and happiness, to be honest. And so I was able to sort of make the leap of didn't even think about that when I, thought about selling my car. It was more about, my car's just sitting most of the day. I was starting to work from home and I thought, of course, the financial outcome of that was going to be pretty great too. Didn't even think about what were going to be the social impacts. And honestly, 2.5 years later, I can tell you that has been the most impactful thing about not having a car, has been the impact on my social connectivity in my community. I feel more tied to my community than I ever had. And I grew up here.
Wow.
So pretty cool.
When we talk about this, what we fail to recognize is that we have an opportunity here with COVID and the lockdown is to get out. I mean, it's good to walk around, not just sit in front of your computer all day, but also to interact with other people on the street, wave to your neighbor across the way.
Totally.
I can talk to my neighbor while I'm walking my dog. She's very happy. She would, a Jack Russell would love to go for a 3-mile walk. Today 100%. I can do that, but I think part of it is I mentioned my friend who's 103. He is up out of the house every day.
Yes. you got to engineer it. You know, I think, again, like you think about the way in the United States, there's a great movie that is called Yes Man by, and I'm terrible with remembering actors' names, but the guy who, anyways, it's called Yes Man, but if you look it up, anyways, the scene in it, which I'll describe to you, that really impacted me, is he's sitting on his sofa watching TV, and there's like a split screen, and his friends are calling him from a public, like a bar or something, that they want him to come and join them, and they're at this place, and it's social, it's fun, and he's at home watching TV, and they show the phone sort of sitting on the table, and it's ringing, and he just ignores it, and he's just sort of zoned into his TV. And I remember watching this is about 10 or 12 years ago. Jim Carrey's the actor. Okay. And I remember watching it and feeling sort of implicated. Like I felt like that could be me, because I like I said, I live by myself. I tend to be a loner, but that's okay. Like, but my ratio is like maybe 70-30, where I like to spend about 70% of the time by myself and 30% social. But when I saw that scene, what impacted me was I knew my tendencies were such that I had to be watchful and intentional about that social side. And that was me in some instances, where people wanted me to connect and go out, and I was sort of shutting it off. And I had, maybe painted myself into a social corner that was not healthy for me mentally. And I remember seeing that scene and being like, something in me snapped. And it was so impactful that I drew up a little piece of art. I created this little 4x4 piece of art that just had the word yes on it, because again, the name of that movie was Yes Man. So the whole principle behind the movie is eventually he also learns that lesson. He starts saying yes to everything, and then it goes on to the escapades of, what does that look like, etc. And I took that personally I put that little sign on my desk, and I really did sort of start living by that principle of, instead of like being met with an opportunity to connect with people and sort of shutting it down, I started to say yes. And the mantra that I use, that I'll share with you, that I still use today, and it changed my life, is connection over comfort. Because my comfort zone was alone and stay, isolated. And I could be very happy like that, like I said, for a lot of times. But what was happening was I was out of balance.
You weren't very happy, were you? Happiness comes from other people too, right?
Right, absolutely. I had become out of balance, I guess, is what I recognized. And but it was uncomfortable for me, because I had sort of, like I said, started living a life that was a little bit more isolated. And so saying yes, like I had this inside part of me that like I had to get over. And I used that mantra, connection over comfort, because I recognized on paper, connection was important, social was important, to your point. And I knew it wasn't in my nature kind of naturally, but I knew that the way I was living my life was leading me to a place that wasn't as happy as I could and should and wanted to be. But so I used that mantra, connection over comfort, because when I would be faced with that, like, let's say invitation, and someone would invite me to go to a dinner or a party or whatever, and I had that piece of me inside that didn't like necessarily want to go, I would remind myself of that mantra and started to really literally use it. And I would just say connection over comfort. And then I started socializing that topic and concept and phrase with my friends and just colleagues. And what I found was, like, there were people that really, it resonated with them. They were like, oh my God, like I totally get that. And I use it today. And like I said, that was over a decade ago. And now
How long did it take you at first? How long did it take you to overcome that I'm comfortable sitting home alone watching TV? Because it didn't happen overnight, right? But it was intentional. No, you forced yourself.
It was very intentional. Okay. Yeah, I think it was an evolution. It's probably a bigger scope, wider story than that. But I look back to my 20s and 30s. If I look at it like decade-wise, maybe is a good lens to look at it. I think about, my 20s, trying to figure out what I want to do for a career, going through some relationship things, whatever. And in my 30s and 40s, I would say was maybe the nadir, is that the right word? Like the low spot, maybe through those decade and a half, where I was, like I said, I was training a lot, doing a lot of triathlon, things that I was doing by myself and sort of pouring myself into those things, but again, became out of balance. And I think it was just over a course of some heartache, some painful times, some therapy, that I started to reflect and look at my life and restart the rebuild, of my life to a certain degree. And little by little, and then you make certain friends, and then you grow, and you read a book, and you watch a movie, and you grow, and et cetera. And then over the course of maybe I would say my 40s into today, I said, as I'm 52, I can honestly say I'm as happy as I've ever been, but it's been a boatload of work to get here. And I think like living by these principles, some of which are, related to physical lifestyle and dietary practices, but that social piece for me, John, was like, it was the part that didn't come natural to me, right? So moving, for example, which someone else, that might be their struggle, and like they don't want to go outside and take a walk, and they don't want to get on their bike. My whole life is that way.
There's always a reason not to do it, right?
Yeah.
It's too hot, too cold, it's too
100%.
rainy, too sunny. Yeah.
Whatever. Right. That comes easy to me. The dietary practices, that comes easy to me. The social part was the part of my power of 9, if you will, that needed work. And like I said, yeah, I think it was probably decades in the making, and where I am today, like I said, as happy as I've been in my lifetime, because I've now built, my life is kind of balanced, I guess. And if I look at the power of 9 and the 9 habits related to people that live in the blue zones, I can say I didn't go about, re-engineering my life to look like that, but I started extracting principles and sort of weighing against my life and like figuring out, I could be doing much better over here, applying myself and growing slowly over the course of time. And I also don't take it for granted. Like I know that things can change quickly. So I also sort of shore myself up with support. Like I have a good social circle. I have a therapist that I've known for a long time that I use him when I need him. And I have, I was brought up with the faith, so I have that's somewhere in my life and in my background. So I rely on that to a certain extent too. So I have sort of a network around me that kind of keeps my boat floating, generally speaking, and trending in a positive direction. And that doesn't mean it's not without heartache still today. Of course, that's part of it. And, but I also recognize the place that holds. And I try to just, again, have good support around me to help me through those times too.
So what I'm hearing is this is about balance. This is about taking those 9 things and putting together holistic life, not just longevity. That's not the only metric that you're measuring today.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you said that because I don't actually personally, I don't want to live to be 90 or for God's sakes, like 100. Like I've seen the 90s. I ushered my dad about 8 or 9 years ago to his passing at 90. My mom's 85 today. She's still alive. The 80s are tough. I think about the orthopedic issues that I've had in my life. And I can imagine, if this is what it feels like at 52, I'm not sure like the 80s are going to feel amazing in terms of the body of things. And so to me, it's not necessarily that people should say, oh God, I want to live to be 100. What I like about these principles is how to have a life of relatively low risk or lowering your risk, let's say, of chronic illness. Because the chronic illness, type 2 diabetes, that cascades into cardiovascular disease, certain cancers, those are tough roads. And the experience of that, if you talk about that with type 2 diabetes, for example, is highly linked to kidney failure. If you end up on dialysis, that's not fun. You could end up with an amputation. Nobody wants that. You could end up blind.
Preventable too. I mean,
yes, totally preventable.
Start today, wherever you are, start today.
Right. Totally preventable. Exactly. So to me, it's really about living more healthy years. Let me put it to you that way. I want to live the longest span of healthy years that I possibly can. And that means partly, dietary things and movement and things. And for me, as I've explained already, and if you look at the blue zones, it's social connectivity. I feel like I'm even like sort of growing in that space even further. Is it okay if I mention my movie concept to the group? Would that be okay? So on that thread that I was talking about with social, and like I said, I've been working on this for about a decade and growing my social circle. And I don't mean that I have, 20 close friends. I have a tight circle of friends. And the principle in Blue Zone.
And you're not just sitting at home. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm not just sitting at home. Now, sometimes I am, because I still do like that. I still do like to watch TV and hang out by myself. And I don't have a dog anymore, but I will have another dog.
That's the balance. There are times, right?
Yes.
Everything in moderation. You're not sitting alone all the time.
Yes.
You're not eating high-fat food, but occasionally, right?
Absolutely.
You have an ice cream, right?
Absolutely. Love me some ice cream.
Great, isn't it?
I love it. I love it so much. And if you put a coffee flavor in that, exactly. So this concept of social in the Blue Zones, it's right tribe is the theme that they call it, but it's a really cool principle. And the one that I really resonated with in Okinawa, Japan, they have this thing called moais, MOIAS. And the principle in Okinawa, Japan is when you're born in Okinawa, you're sort of assigned to this group that they call a moai. And what it is it's an engineered group of a small circle, usually less than 10, of people of your age who you're going to just sort of travel your life with. And if you go onto the Blue Zones website or you do any research around their moais in Okinawa, Japan, what you'll see are these circles of friends that gather regularly. They frequently have wine together at, after work or whatever. And they show them in their 90s still sitting in these circles of support, right? And that principle to me, again, not being married, no kids, so don't have that sort of built-in social circle. So I've built my social circle and I've got this, moai, if you will, engineered. And one of the things with COVID, because, the whole social gathering, and many of my friends are even older than I am. So, some are in their 40s, some are 50s, some are 60s. I even have a good friend in my building who's 75, and she's in our social circle. I call her the inner circle. And so my house, which is not too large, it used to be a very common place of gathering. Love to cook, food and watch. I have a big screen TV, so we watch cool, movies or documentaries, and just a wonderful thing to do. Now, we didn't do it every day, maybe usually once a month, probably we would do a gathering. And with COVID, because of, social distancing and things, we've worked to continue to be socially connected. And so one of the things that I invested in just about a month and a half ago was an outdoor projector and movie screen, and cost me about $300 on Amazon. And it's pretty simple. It's just like a projector you'd see in any conference room in any office that you've been in, remarkably. And then the screen is this portable 100-inch screen that it looks like a glorified bed sheet, but it's got a stand on it. It's really easy. It takes me about 6 minutes to set up. Okay. And I rode around my community and I scouted out a recon mission, any parks that had electricity that I could tap into, because you need a power source, right? You could buy a power box, but I didn't want to invest in that. So I found 4 parks in my community that had outlets that were live. And what we've started doing is gathering with the same group of people, and same thing, like it's food, a little bit of drink, and then an event to watch, right? So we watch a movie.
The social part is there.
The social part is
there. Good
wine
food.
Is there.
Wow.
Good healthy food. We're all sort of in a plant slant. So one of the Power of 9 concepts around food is plant slant. So doesn't mean that you have to be a vegetarian or a vegan or anything like that. But if you want to know what the healthiest populations in the world are doing, they're eating whole foods, plant-based diets. And there's a lot of room for, variety within that. But my group tends to sort of eat that way. Sometimes we'll pick up a bunch of Domino's. Domino's has a great 3-topping takeout pizza for $7.99. Wow. And so everyone will get their own pizza and have a salad, some wine. We'll watch this event. Everyone brings their own lawn chairs to sit and watch this movie at a little bit of a distance from one another. And it's been marvelous. And this weekend, in fact, because I've been a little bit inspired by this Blue Zones deep dive that I've been doing these last few days, we're going to show one of the documentaries on Blue Zones. And I know they're going to love it. And more than that, it's like painting ourselves with sort of that brush of health, that comes from, John, all those things that you said. It's social, it's good food, it's a little bit of wine, we laugh, we ease some of our burdens. And when you think about COVID and the stresses that have resulted from people, the social isolation that has come, right? So the incidence of depression, anxiety that we know are zooming up as a result of COVID, it's combating that. And so I think about it from all of those lenses, and I'm the sort of mastermind behind, getting my group to gather. And like I said, I was the one who invested in these things because I could do the math, and I'm, this is my field, so I understand
that. It's an investment, right? It's an investment in your longevity, in your happiness.
Absolutely. And it pays dividends, and I'm happier for it. If I, go back to the earlier part of the conversation, I think back to my 30s and 40s when I was not living this way and how much less happy I was. I'm like, well, this is why. And it does take investment of intentional, like you said earlier, and doing certain things and maybe reflecting on your life and going, where could I be doing better? And then you start living it. And the good news is it doesn't have to be complicated. There's a lot of common sense in there. And this is a beautiful model. There's other good models of healthy living, but this is one of the cool ones I think that's out there. And if this sparks you in any way, there's a ton of resources. If you just go to bluezones.com, there's articles and newsletters and books and YouTube videos and, the gamut, and you can certainly go there and learn more about it on your own. And it's pretty inspiring. And there's even I think it's a weekly email that I get from the Blue Zones projects that kind of gives you a little update on, projects that they're working on that are also sort of sparking inspiration.
Do research? Is that an ongoing research project?
Yeah. So the Blue Zones projects, the origination of this research was 2003. Okay. And, it's just grown, of course. And today where it's at, because, it just sort of kept sprouting, green shoots, if you will. So the Blue Zones book was probably the first thing that Dan Buettner wrote, best-selling best-selling New York Times bestseller. And then there's been multiple books since then. So there's Thrive, there's Blue Zones of Happiness, Blue Zones Kitchen, there's some documentaries. But today, I don't know when the Blue Zones projects started, but there's another trademarked concept called Blue Zones projects. And what they started doing is saying, okay, let's look at the United States health. 6 in 10 U.S. Adults have one chronic illness. 4 in 10 have 2 or more, leading to that $3.5 trillion, leading to that 18% GDP, right? What can we be doing as if I'm a Blue Zones researcher, what could I do to spread the word, if you will, right? So corporations like that I work with, employers that are doing well-being initiatives, that's one avenue. There's lots of organizations that are trying to help the population as a whole be healthier. MedHQ, you guys, I'm sure, are doing things within your community along the spectrum of health to illness to try to help people get better and be preventive. And the Blue Zones projects was the effort of the Blue Zones team to say, like, how can we partner with communities to start to try to have an impact to sort of model after these Blue Zones 5 hotspots? How do we model that in a community in the United States? And so the Blue Zones projects was born out of that. And as you can imagine, now you're starting to bring in business concepts, road mapping, strategy around how do we make it the healthy choice, the easier choice. So sometimes it goes so far in these certain projects in areas and the areas of the country. I don't know exactly how many there are, but I'll name off a few of the spaces that I know that they're working on in Beach Cities, California, Alberta, Lea, Minnesota, Spencer, Iowa, and Fort Worth, Texas. Those are 4 large Blue Zones projects. And what they're doing is they're working on designing, improving streets, park design, public policy, social involvement.
Walkable streets?
Yeah, make it more walkable. Okay. Exactly. And so these are big initiatives. This is no small lift. And so they're to apply to be a Blue Zones project community, there's an application process. And so you can imagine, you've got to get key stakeholders at the table, you've got to get investment, you've got to get bandwidth, et cetera. I actually looked into this a little bit for my community, and I feel us trending in this direction. The mayor of the community where I live is actually a member of the the gym where I teach spin class, and he's super healthy and a great guy. And I've already, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about how can we trend in this direction? And so I even think in some ways this whole COVID thing in the movie concept, it might be a way, like, so can you imagine, so if you're a community and you somehow have the ability to reach a mayor like I do, he's right. A friend, I would say a personal friend, to say, okay, mayor, let's go show a park outside to the community because of COVID. And the movie's going to be Fed Up, the documentary Fed Up, which is about, it was a documentary that Katie Couric narrated about the big food industry. And at the end of Fed Up, they challenge you to a 10-day sugar challenge. I actually took that challenge myself about 10 or 12 years ago, also sort of in that time. So believe it or not, I used to have sort of a sugar habit. I still love sweets. As I said, I do love ice cream and things, but I used to have sort of a sugar habit where every day I was having, probably 200 to 300 calories roughly of sugar. So processed sugar, so things like sweets and ice creams and things every day. And what was happening was my glucose was starting to creep up, and my doctor would look at me because I was the peak of health, like super conditioned, very fit. My body weight was always, very normal and healthy. And she would look at me and she would say, how is this happening? And I would tell her right off, I'd say, well, I eat really healthy, but every day I eat a brownie and ice cream. And she would say, well, can't you have an apple and peanut butter instead? And for about 3 years, I would just look her right in the face. I'd say, no, like I'm not doing it. I
deserve it, right? I deserve it.
I loved it. And when I saw that documentary and I saw that challenge, and at the time I was the wellness manager for Bosch, Robert Bosch, that you guys might know from like dishwashers and cars and aftermarket auto. And we ran that 10-day sugar. We actually screened the documentary at all of our Bosch locations for the whole population. And we paid, there's like, you have to pay like a fee to the people that made the movie. And then we put on the 10-day sugar challenge as a challenge, as part of our wellbeing initiative. And I took it. And I will tell you, it changed another thing that changed my life. I broke my sugar habit, and the first 3 days were very, very, very challenging. I felt like I've never gone through DTs or withdrawal or anything like that, but it felt like that.
For that sugar, right? You were jonesing.
Yeah. Jonesing is not the word. And I have a good friend she's still a good friend today. And she was a Bosch. She was my client liaison. And on day one, cause you feel pretty good right at the start. Right. And you're like feeling fine. And I told her, I'm like, okay, you're going to take, cause every day I used to eat like, these hard coffee candies. Cause I love coffee flavored things. And there were these real specific, they kind of look like Jolly Ranchers, but they were coffee. And at the end of the day, if you looked at my wastebasket, there would be like 15 wrappers. Because over the course of the day, I would just start sucking on them, right? And so I gave her my coffee candies, and I said, Sandy, you need to hang on to these and keep me from them. And on day 3, John, I'm not kidding you, it was like an addict, I guess, sort of like I was like Sandy. I was losing my mind with the urge for the sugar. But then what ended up happening was I got through that day, and she did her part, which was to keep me from the candies. I got through that day. And then that next day, something happened in my physiology started to shift. And all the things that you read, if you go read up on any sugar research and challenges and things like that, what shows is that your physiology starts to adjust, your palate starts to change. And that jonesing that was so strong, I thought I would never make it. But they did tell you, like in the sugar challenge, they're like, you're going to feel pretty bad for a couple days. Some people describe it like a hangover. And then you're going to sort of lift out of that space. And I can just tell you that was my experience. And in talking to the other Bosch participants that participated, many of them had the similar experience. And then that was in 2012, and this is 2020. So about 8 years ago, it changed my sugar eating. And today, I still have sugar in my life today, and I do enjoy it, but it's totally, John, to your point, you've said it a couple of times, in moderation. And right. I feel great about that. To be honest, like how I felt when I was eating daily refined sugar, processed sweets was not as well, I guess, and affected my sleep and things like that. So anyways, I can't remember why we started on that thread, but in any event,
things in moderate. You didn't have to go cold turkey. You still do have
Today
a little bit of sugar. So you enjoy one of those candies, but not 15 a day, perhaps, right?
That's exactly right. So exactly, and that's a good when I mentioned the wastebasket filled with 15 wrappers. Today, I do still eat daily chocolate, but I have like a square at lunch, after lunch, and a square after dinner, just like a thing. And then once in a while, a full-on dessert once in a while if I'm out with friends and we're at a restaurant. I still love that. Like I love a warm brownie with ice cream, John. You got me.
But it's once a month, right? Once a month is
that, and then I enjoy it, and so and I'm pleased that I made that change. I love to eat. I think that that's an important part of.
But it's socializing too. Eating. I come from an Italian family.
It's my favorite food is Italian food.
The plates are big and the love is good. My grandmother would feed me, and then she couldn't understand. John, I don't understand why are you so fat. My secret is I used to be super morbidly obese. When I say super morbidly, I was almost 600 pounds.
What?
So yes, and I lived my life assuming I would be dead at 50 because my dad was the first male to live past 50.
Wow.
I'm 63, 13 years. Every day I wake up and go, this is a great life. I love it.
Well, how did you do it? I'm dying to know. I'm sure people would want to know if you want to share it. What did you do?
I woke up one day. My daughter was my reason for doing it because I recognized I would not be around to see all the great things that were going to happen to her. She's 24 today, so she's the reason. And it was a total life change. It was a big realization that I was doing this to myself because I did recognize that supermorbid obesity in general, leads to a lifestyle that I didn't want. I didn't want the diabetes. And it was coming. It was coming. The high blood pressure, it was coming. I was lucky enough to have found it just in time. That's one of the reasons why I had to have a knee replacement. But I just got back from Lake Tahoe. And I can tell you, I walked up a mountain, something I would not have done a year ago. Walked up a mountain, and I kept the people coming down. I kept saying, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And they go, oh, yes, it's so worth it. And they were very active looking people. And I'm going, okay. And I'm trudging up. It was probably about a mile up the hill. It was worth it. Life at the top of the mountain was worth it. The scene I got to see, I would not have been able to see it from the bottom of the hill.
Yeah.
But, and it took time, and I stopped along the way, and I enjoyed that. But at the end of the day, that's a metaphor for life, right? I never say no anymore. I used to say, no, I can't eat ice cream. And then when I did splurge on ice cream, I ate a gallon of ice cream because I deserved it. I hadn't eaten ice cream for, I love chocolate cake. I don't eat chocolate cake anymore. Not because, I might have a bite. Tiramisu, we go to a place. I love it. I love their tiramisu. But a couple of bites, I'm good. Thank you so much.
That's amazing.
It is, but it was a choice, and it did take a while to overcome it.
No question.
But it is so worth it. I can tell you at 63,
that's amazing.
It is worth it. I'm going to be like my friend Ed. I don't want to necessarily be 103, but if I can be like my grandfather, my Italian grandfather, he was probably from one of these locations that did well. He had moderation, a little wine every day.
A little bit.
He got up, walked around. He had activity. He never entered a gym in his life, I bet you, but he was active on a daily basis.
Yes.
And that's the kind of life I want. I want to be 93. I want to be alive and well and cognitively functioning. If I have to have a knee replacement, it's a worn part, but I feel great. And you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it.
That's an amazing story.
You are a model for that because I can imagine. I have never had a sugar-flavored soda pop in my life. I'm 63 years old. Now, I've had a lot of Diet Coke, but you know what? I've even gone away from the Diet Coke. And it was a habit to break as well because at about 3 days, you got a huge headache. And then the headache goes away.
It goes away.
It goes away.
That's a great testament.
Occasionally, I'll drink a Diet Coke, but iced tea, unsweetened iced tea, light on the ice, I'm good.
That's a great testament. You mentioned one thing I'd love to comment on because I think this is really relevant and important.
Sure.
regarding your decision to change your life. And you said you had a purpose with a daughter. And one of again, a lot of these principles that we're sort of layering in here, one of the principles of Blue Zones is purpose. And the Okinawans call it ikigai, and the Nicoyans call it a plan de vida. And for both, it translates into why I wake up in the morning. And knowing your sense of purpose is worth up to 7 years of extra life expectancy.
Wow.
And so without even knowing it, John, you were doing something that was aligned, multiple things actually in your story there that were aligned with the Blue Zones lifestyle. So very well done. Thank you for sharing that story.
I mean, if I want to learn more about these 9 things in the Blue Zones as well, where do I go? Bluezone.com, I heard you say, is that?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best place to go, just because that's just sort of like ground zero, where you can then find all the other resources around books and newsletters. And if you want to read about the Blue Zones projects, and you could go to YouTube and search Blue Zones, TEDx,
Just got to get up and do it. I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to walk to the corner today and maybe a little farther tomorrow. And then, take my dog out. She's very happy. Jack Russell, she'll go as far as you want to go.
Oh, I miss my dog. I can't wait to get another one. Yeah, think about, maybe not using your car as much, things like that. And you can do it. That's the thing. Like in our minds, I think we think it can't be any other way, but it absolutely can. You can live very in a Blue Zones way in whatever community you're living in today. And that's pretty exciting stuff.
Well, Fran, it has been a pleasure. I appreciate the time today. You have made me want to get up out of my Zoom chair and go in and make my own Blue Zone. Take a walk. Sandy, do you want to come with me? She's sleeping here. She said yes.
That's so awesome.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't take a lot of effort. It just takes determination and intentionality.
100%. 100%. Well said.
Fran, it has been a pleasure. Fran Scott, practice leader for Hub International, health and performance going all the way. Fran, enjoy your summer of social activity. I can't even imagine how great your friends think that's going to be.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Great. And thanks to you guys for having me today. I loved it.
Thanks, Fran. I'm John Page with Fran Scott for Heart of the Business here with MedHQ. Thank you so much, Fran. I will be thinking about you when I take my dog for the walk today.
Awesome.
Be well. Stay well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.